So welcome back to the channel. Today we start a new build. And I'm not going to call this one boring, because I'm actually quite excited to work on it. I happen to like these trucks, in case you couldn't tell. I have two of them. So this is the Dirtnali's little brother. It's a 2019 GMC Sierra Denali 2500 HD with an L5P Duramax. Now I really enjoyed having the Dirtnali for the last year. It's been my absolute favorite truck, hands down. But there were a couple things about it that made it not the perfect truck for me. Now if you don't know what the Dirtnali is, or what I didn't like about it, links up there, get you caught up. However, this truck checks all the boxes, that one didn't. Which means this could be my forever truck. Of course, the afternoon crew thinks that's hilarious because every time I say I'm keeping something, it's gone the next month. But I have no intention of getting rid of this truck. At least not until GM makes something that's not quite as ugly as the 2020 HD. And since this truck is going to last longer than me, it'll probably be the last truck I ever buy. So one of the two biggest problems I had with the Dirtnali was the fact that it didn't have a sunroof. And this truck does. It also only has 12,000 miles on it and still smells new in here. It's got a lot of aftermarket accessories that were installed by the dealer. About $5,000 worth. So those are little bonuses that I don't have to pay for. You'll never get your money back when you sell it, but it's all stuff I would have added if I bought the truck for myself. So it saved me about $5,000. See, the other big thing that I didn't like about the Dirtnali was the fact that it had a clear title. Now, most people will think that's a disadvantage to this one. Well, it's not, because with the salvage title comes a lower price, and that's all I really care about. I don't care what the title says. I'll sell that truck at a higher price to somebody that does. So this truck has less than a third of the miles, actually almost a quarter of the miles the Dirtnali had when I got it. It needs less work, and I paid almost the same amount of money. Now, there is a year difference in the trucks, but I bought them a year apart, so we'll just call that a wash. So this is actually a better deal. This also has a lot more aftermarket accessories than that truck does. So before we get into the body damage, let's talk about the suspension, because we need to fix that just to get it off the trailer. Now on this side, it hit a curb. The curb broke the lower control arm and caused some collateral damage. We got a shock that's got some dents in it. We got an inner tie rod that looks like a U, a drive axle that's no longer driving, and a tire with a hole in. I'm pretty sure we can't patch that. The wheel has a little nick on it. Definitely usable, but I haven't seen the inside to find out if it really is usable. So that's it for this side. We fix all that, should be good. It'll sit level and it'll steer. The other side, the tire caught the pole. And I can be pretty sure because there's some of it still in the car. Truck, whatever. So we're gonna have to take that out. But we have a broken inner tie rod and a ball joint that is a little concerning. So we're gonna have to at least change the ball joint, possibly the control arm. I'm just gonna change the tie rod so we can get it off the trailer, put it up on the lift and take some measurements. If our control arm is good, I'll change the ball joint. If it's bad, we'll change it all. So there's our tie rod. Pretty safe to say that's no good. Our ball joint. It almost looks like it was loosened up. Not quite sure how that works. As you can see, it's moved. So we're going to change that, unless the whole control arm is bent. But like I say, we have to measure it first. More dirt. The Dirtnali 2.0. So once we get the suspension done, we should be able to back it right off the trailer, take a better look at the body. Now, I don't even have to worry about jump starting this one because the batteries were full. It runs, it just doesn't drive. So let's get to work, see if we can get it off the trailer. So first we're going to unstrap it from the trailer. This jacking it up when it's still strapped down is great for testing the tensile strengths of the straps and the strength of the boards on the floor. That's really inconvenient for actually jacking up the truck. Seems our steering's gone a little limp. Pull the center cap off. Probably could have left it on and give it a lug nuts with the cap on, but it's gonna have to come off eventually anyway. Loosen up the jam nut with our metric adjustable hammer. It's nice working on brand new stuff that's nice and clean with no rust. We don't get that much up here. This truck came from North Carolina, so it's pretty clean. Minus the dirt, of course. So now we'll take the inner tie rod off, or what's left of it. And get our inner tie rod tool in there and break it loose. Now we'll spin it off there. Here we go again with the Loctite. I guess Loctite at least makes sense on this one. Of course, I don't have a swimming pool to dunk it in. I'll try threading that inner tie rod end in. If at first you don't succeed, try again. Then accept the fact that if it didn't work the first 5 times, it's probably not going to work the 6th. And try something different. I can't get the tie rod end at a good angle for the threads to start, so I'm going to have to pull the sway bar link out. Hopefully that'll give us enough room that we can get a straight shot to get that tie rod end down there, at least to start a couple threads. We don't want to rip the threads out of the center link. There goes nothing. And we got it started. So now we can tighten it up with our inner tie rod tool. These are available on my Amazon store if you want to check them out. They're really handy. Click. I'll spin our jam nut on there. Now we'll pull the outer tie rod end off the knuckle so we can spin it back on our inner tie rod end. But before we do, we're going to put some Never Sees on this, because the next guy might want to not struggle taking it apart. And I think I know who the next guy is going to be. So we can put our tie rod back in our knuckle. We'll worry about the ball joint later. We just need it off the trailer. I'm hoping that'll hold at least to get it off the trailer. We'll tighten up the jam nut with our adjustable hammer. I thought I grabbed the wrong size there for a second. Even though we're not going far, we don't want it backing out of there. Put our sway bar link back in there, because if I don't, I'll lose it. Put our tire back on. We'll leave the wood in it for now. We'll get that later. The rim is damaged on the inside. When it went all the way back around, it hit the inside of the frame and broke the lip of the wheel. Still holds air, but I wouldn't trust it. Might make a good spare. Time for a little framework. We can make some room. Put a little tension on the bumper. Alright, put a lot of tension on the bumper. And we'll use our bumper adjustment tool. Gently tap it back into place. Bump up the tension a little bit. And continue adjusting our bumper. Perfect. Now on to the other side. That was the easy side. Can't really get the jack underneath it. I caught a little piece of the frame rail. So we'll get it up just enough to put that jack stand underneath there. I'll jack it up a little higher. We'll just keep going with the jack stand, because it's pretty sketchy. And if I'm saying it's sketchy, you can take it to the bank. That is sketchy. So we'll let it down in the jack stand, then we'll get the jack further under the frame rail, get a better bite on it. Now when I've reached an acceptable level of safety for myself, which the bar is set pretty low, we'll go ahead and pull the tire off. When the control arm broke, the tire slammed up into the wheel well and kind of crumpled up the wheel liner. Kind of in my way, so I'm going to pull it out of here. There's still a few screws left in it, so we'll take those out, ink this out, and throw it in the pile. We'll have to call the carpet company to get a new one. Spin the outer tie rod end off. Use the appropriately sized hammer to knock it out of our knuckle. Now we're going to bolt our sway bar link. Pop the little dust cap off so we can see our drive axle nut. We'll spin the drive axle nut off. We'll tap the drive axle out. I don't care if I mess up the thread, so we'll hammer on it. Turn the knuckle so it's a little easier to work on. Take the lower ball joint out. I'm not sure why I thought this little hammer would do the job. Maybe I should have grabbed the brake job hammer. But this hammer will do it. I win. So that's what's left of our lower control arm. Apparently the tires on these things are stronger than the control arm. In the pile. Go ahead, make your jokes, Ford fans. GM deserves it. Now we're going to bolt the shock. We do have the jack underneath there, holding some tension on that lower control arm. But apparently, I don't have enough. I'm about to find out. So it dropped down. Just jack it up a little more. Take the tension off, and that bolt will slide right out. Now we can let all our tension off the lower control arm. We have to remove the protective dirt coating the previous owner installed over the bolts for the lower control arm. Now with the dirt gone, the bolts are exposed. We can pull the bolts out of the lower control arm. The nut and a bolt. Loosen up the back one and run it out of there. Pull the front one out of there. Now we grab the roaming gnome. Got him put a pry bar in there and pry our torsion bar down and out a little bit. Then I can just slide the control arm off the front without taking anything else apart. Oh, more dirt. Imagine that. I decided to use the adjustable hammer on this tie rod end because I don't have one of those fancy angled tie rod end tools that goes around corners. Mine's only for the straight inner tie rod ends. But without the lower control arm in the way, it's pretty easy to get a wrench on here. I did use the strap to hold the knuckle out of my way so you guys could see what I was doing. And because I was tired of pushing it out of my way. In the pile. Now we got our new inner tie rod end and our outer tie rod end as a complete assembly. Remember that mistake truck of mine? Well, its parts went to good use. Click. It's also where this lower control arm came from. So we'll slide it on the torsion bar. Come on, gnome. Try a little harder. Ah, there we go. I'll knock it in there. Jack it up and run the bolts in. Put the control arm down, and we can move it around, get that front bolt in there. Tap it in there. Then we can jack the control arm up so we can put our shock bolt back in. I'm going to get a new shock. The ones off the mistake truck were rusty. I don't want rusty parts on my new truck. Now we can put our sway bar link in there. Bolt it down. Unbolt our upper control arm. We need to drop the knuckle down so we can get it on the lower control arm. And that's all the camera battery thought you needed to see. My hands were a little too full to check and see if the camera was still recording. So you missed a little bit. So since you missed it, I promise on the next one I'll make sure I don't miss any of it for you. We took the upper control arm nut off so that we could drop the knuckle down low enough to get the knuckle around the lower ball joint and get that nut on there. Then we're going to jack it up so that we can get the nut on the upper control arm. Hold this all back together. We're going to put the drive axle in the bearing because some of these bearings, the axle itself holds them together. Others have a sleeve inside. I'm not sure which this is, but if you don't put the axles in, the ones that need to be held together, they fall apart. And after a bad bearing experience, I learned this handy little piece of information. Mr. Spotty Cameo. Put our little cap back on there so I don't lose it. Our wheel turned out to be good on the inside, so I just threw a junk tire on it for now. I'll have to pull it apart and change that drive axle and the shock later. This part of the process requires no explanation. So that horrible sound is the door grinding on the fender as I open it because the fender's tucked up underneath it. Doesn't exactly go straight. That ball joint is pretty bent. Hopefully it makes it through this. It also doesn't steer. Not very well anyway. We have no power steering. We're gonna have to figure out why. So we have it up on the lift. Let's figure out what's wrong with our power steering. We pull down this pretend skid plate, and we'll pull down this actual skid plate. And this might be why our power steering doesn't work. That is the gearbox dripping away. I don't know what's wrong with it, but I know it's not supposed to leak fluid out the bottom. Something internal must have broken when they hit the pole or the curb, one or the other, or both. So we're just going to have to get a new gearbox. While it's up here, let's measure our control arm, see if we're changing the whole control arm or just our ball joint. Everything is looking good. All of our cross measurements are the same. Our control arm's in the right spot. Our frame's in the right spot. We don't have any frame damage either. So we're definitely going to need a bumper. I don't know if we're going to need a full assembly or we'll just need the metal piece and maybe some trim. Depends on how it's priced out, what turns out to be the best deal. All of our sensors and wiring harness and all that stuff is good, but sometimes this chrome trim and the brackets can really add up. So it might be cheaper just to get the whole thing. We'll find out. Looks like the grill's still good. I'll know once I get it apart. Definitely need a hood. Everybody wants the L5P hoods. I actually need one. Gonna need a headlight. Those aren't cheap. Maybe I can find a reconditioned one. We're definitely gonna need a fender. This liner looks like it'll be okay. The other liner was ripped out, so we'll have to replace that. There's a couple of dents on our door here from the mirror. I'd imagine fell into it. Gonna need a mirror. One of the really expensive power folding mirrors, of course. A belt molding. So this is definitely going to be cheaper to put this door all together than buy a used one, because used ones don't even come with mirrors anyway. So we're going to need a windshield. We're going to need a roof skin. Of course, if I had bought a truck without a sunroof, this would have been a perfect excuse to put a sunroof in. But of course, the truck that I do buy with a sunroof ends up needing a roof skin. Just my luck. We need to straighten out the A-pillar here. I don't think we'll need to replace anything. Just straighten this out. That looks like it. Let's get it apart and see if there's any surprises underneath. Another Mr. Spotty cameo. So we'll pull the closeout panel off the top. Just a bunch of little push rivets. Pop the centers up and pull the rivets out. Now we're gonna unbolt our grill. And a couple clips that decided to fall down in there. They were pulled out of the grill, but looks like all we need is some clips and not a grill, which is good because the clips are much cheaper. We'll unplug the parking sensors in the bumper, and we'll unbolt the two outside brackets for the bumper. There's 4 bolts in the center of the bumper. 2 uppers, 2 lowers. Pull those out, and our bumper's ready to come off. And then pull our headlight out. Pull the filler down. And unbolt the bottom of the headlight now. Raining headlight parts. This is the part where they usually fall out. This one likes it in there. It does not want to leave. Try pulling it out of there gently. So much for gently. It's time to get a little rough. It's out now. Well, at least most of it is. The back of the housing is actually stuffed in the radiator support. Get that out of there so we can unplug it. Throw this whole mess in the pile. Even though it actually did still work. Not really any surprises. We are going to need a headlight mounting panel. It's this little piece that goes on the front of the radiator support. It's bent in a bunch of places. So in order for our grille and headlight to fit properly, we'll just replace it. Looks like the radiator support might have a little bend on the outside edge. We can probably straighten that out where the fender mounts there. Those radiator supports aren't cheap. So a little bit of work to straighten it might be worth it. There's really nothing hidden under there that I wasn't expecting. Straighten that bracket out a little bit for the bumper. Everything else looks pretty good. So that's as far as we can go today. We need to start collecting our parts so we can put this build back together. And you might be surprised where I found the best deals. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. I can't wait.